and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis the 13th, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my Rothschild niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed Vic homes out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J. Tonight, as we are recapping the first round of the French election that happened today, where candidates Macron and Le Pen are, I don't know if it's official yet, I believe that they, at least by the preliminary results, are expected to go on to the second round. Where they'll be facing off on May 7th for the presidency of France. Macron, the establishment candidate, I guess you could say, who apparently had touted that he had some endorsement from Barack Obama, but later pretty much Obama said that he never gave the endorsement to him, so that was kind of a spectacle in itself. And then Le Pen, the nationalist candidate from the party, the National Front, which is a party that wants to pull out of the European Union, wants to pretty critical of NATO, and is critical of France's role in these interventions in the Middle East, including Syria. One of the things that is more controversial on their agenda is their stance towards the refugees coming to France, and that they have taken, I think, over 1 million refugees into France, and they want to slow down the amount of refugees they've taken in, and also want to impose stricter rules on the refugees already in France. Another thing that Le Pen and the party platform is based upon is that they want to strengthen their relations with Russia and oppose what they see as a new Cold War between the United States and Russia. And I think Le Pen's made it more clear that later on her position when it comes to foreign policies went from earlier in the campaign, it was a more position that may hopefully the United States, France, and Russia can all work together. But now she realized how naive that is. I think it's more along as a stance that the United States won't be really a partner to France in the future, and that Le Pen and Putin could get along together. But there's not going to be playing both sides when it comes to that in the future. Le Pen's actual apparently she's like neck and neck with Macron, at least in the first round. Now, what's concerning is the polls that show the second round don't seem to be as favorable to Le Pen. Le Pen also wants to take the side of Iran when it comes to fighting ISIS, and also wants to support Assad in his fight against the terrorists in Syria. Also, she has stated that she wants to no longer allow dual Israeli citizenship in France. And, you see how it is here in the United States, where 15 senators have dual Israeli citizenship, many congressmen. They have very lenient rules here on the citizenship, and allows, these people that obviously have two different interests between the American people and the Israeli people, or the Israeli government, of course, that the United States government, no one's serving the American people when it comes to people at the high-level positions, but that's blatantly showing how that happens. And you allow these people to be dual Israeli citizens. And Le Pen wants to end that in France and no longer allow any citizens to be dual Israeli citizens. And it's funny how the media's painted her out to be a racist, a bigot, many other things. When apparently she has said that she sees all people that live in France as French, regardless of the ethnicity. And it's funny that it's eroding. Those claims of her being far right are starting to erode away, and it's becoming no longer a left-right thing. But it's just the people of France. A lot of people all across the country are uniting behind her that want an alternative. But you see the establishment trying to team up now. Like Fillon says that he'll vote for Macron in the second round. Fillon is one of the challengers in this election, but he conceded today, and Fillon's a conservative, I guess you could say. That's what his official position. He's center right. Macron's like the center candidate. There's also Hamon, which I figure that he's probably going to vote for Macron. He's the center left candidate, and then there's Mélenchon, or he was the left candidate, I guess you could say. Hamon. There was Mélenchon, who was the far left candidate. I wonder how he'll vote, considering that many things him and Le Pen are actually very similar, but at the same time they had very fierce debates and they don't appear to be too friendly to each other. But Mélenchon, one of his things that he talked about was joining the Organization of Bolivarian States, which is an organization that is it was formed by Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro back in 2005, and it's a organization that promoted the ideas of Bolivian revolution in South America. And it's kind of weird that this French candidate wanted to reach out to the Latin American countries, but at the same time, he also did seem to show some forms of nationalism in his campaign. It was that for being someone considered far left, you didn't see, you think that his campaign would be filled with a lot of red banners, but actually there was a lot of French flags at the campaign. Le Pen, however, is going to be the one that's going to be the challenge. And Mélenchon is no longer relevant as he lost in the first round, and it's going to come down to Le Pen versus Macron, who Le Pen, I've been intrigued with her for a while, and I was more intrigued with her than I was with Mélenchon. I think partially because I thought that Mélenchon did not have much of a chance of actually getting anywhere, and he actually ended up having a chance. He finished in third. It was very close to the top two, but Macron ended up. I said Macron and probably took some of his votes. I'm sure that people wanted to vote for the one that could challenge Le Pen, and Le Pen. I'm sure the thing about Le Pen also is that she is getting those people. I think also from the left in the country, despite that her label that's been thrown at her a lot. And people said far right, extreme right. People have labeled her as a fascist, a Nazi. And there's nothing that she said that really labels that she has sympathies towards Nazis. In fact, she seems to be pretty tough on them when it comes to the ones in Ukraine, and she wants to recognize Crimea as Russian. So, in my opinion, Le Pen is actually the furthest thing from a Nazi in this campaign. She's actually a very in touch candidate when it comes to foreign policy, and it's not spitting out complete globalist garbage. And Trump, he did some of the same as well in his campaign, which always puts a red flag over Le Pen. But at the same time, it wasn't to this level, and there was definitely red flags all throughout the Trump campaign that Trump might be able to flip flop, and he ended up doing is that he not the things that he talked about not getting the war in Syria, he gets into the war in Syria. He talks about developing good relations with Russia. Now we have worse relations than ever with Russia. He talks about the draining the swamp. He puts back more of these establishment officials and brings in people from Goldman Sachs into his campaign. Donald Trump and Le Pen, I think, are not really too comparable. A lot of people like to compare Donald Trump and Le Pen, but I think Le Pen's kind of distanced herself from Trump, especially in these last few months and after the strike in Syria. I think Le Pen was able to push away from that. But, it's weird one of the things that ran into a lot of controversy was a comment that she said about about France's role in World War II, where I think she said that France did not have a role in rounding up Jews in World War II. And while that is true, historically looking at the Vichy, there was two different Frances: Vichy France, and then there was the France of the French Freedom Legion. I think what she was referring to is that the French Freedom Legion had no part in that, and that they were the official country of France, and that the Vichy France was just ultimately a German satellite. And this is a stance that I think de Gaulle took back in the day, which de Gaulle was a commander or whatnot in World War II. So it really ultimately she's actually just going with what one of their maybe their greatest president since World War II had to say about the France's role was work with Germany in World War II, and not regarding Vichy's France as the actual France. Seems like something kind of minute in a way to get people worked up over, and it seems just to be one more attempt and a baseless attempt in order to try to discredit Le Pen. But apparently, it did take some of a number on her polls on these last few weeks. I am a little bit intrigued by how these next 2 weeks are going to go down. And there was a terror attack or whatever that happened shortly before this first round, and some people said that boosted Le Pen's numbers. But what I think is going to be ultimately the big decider is what could go down in Syria, because it seems like just unfolding every week something new, or what goes down over on the Korean Peninsula. Because if Le Pen can capitalize on saying that joining the United States is a terrible idea because look, they've already entered Syria or whatnot, then she can use that in her own campaign to maybe give herself the boost to get past Macron. But unfortunately, right now, as it looks, I say that the chances that she gets past Macron are less likely than actually happen. I don't think that's going to, right now, I don't think the odds are in her favor. And partially because I see the elite consolidating all their parties or whatnot. And I think they might be able to boost, from even somebody that's considered an outsider, Mélenchon, who came out of nowhere. They might be able to take a lot of his supporters and put them on the Macron bandwagon, because he was using that fear and that baiting of saying that it's like you have to vote for Macron or else the fascist wins. And, keep implying that Le Pen is a fascist and that Le Pen is extreme right, when it's ultimately just how I see it. It's a baseless lie. And it has a base, but it's not in reality. It's misconstruing stuff. It's pulling stuff out of context of what she had to say. There's one thing that was a little bit alarming. Apparently, she said something about colonialism or whatever, and I think she tried to imply that the French colonialism was good on its colonies, which is a lie. And to believe that is ignoring all the brutality and many of these terrible things that they did in countries like Algeria that they conquered for 132 years, and Vietnam and other countries, which, like Britain, like all these other European colonial powers, subjected their colonial subordinates into horrible conditions. But I have to say as well is that what I saw that was on Al Jazeera Plus or whatever, or AJ Plus. For people that don't know, AJ Plus is actually Al Jazeera, which Al Jazeera is a Qatari news network that backs Salafist terrorists in Syria, and they do push the idea of some ideas like such as decolonization, or they push the idea of some pro-Palestinian stuff, but it's all lure in order to get people to support some of the major things that Israel wants to do, like overthrowing the Assad regime. And they've even been able to, I think with Al Jazeera, they've been able to recruit some Palestinians to go fight for the Salafist terrorists by pushing the myth that there's some kind of connection between Tel Aviv and Assad, when there isn't. And, I see some of the Palestinian community actually saying this, is that they accuse Assad of being a Zionist or whatnot. When it's, he's been, his entire career practically, he's been fighting Zionists. His father was an avid enemy towards the Zionists. So it's obviously it's idiotic, honestly, that that they push the idea that there's a connection between the two. But I think that's what Al Jazeera has been able to do, and Al Jazeera has also been able to influence a lot of Muslim Americans here in the United States, or Muslims across Europe, and also people of other ethnicities or whatnot, or Muslim religion, but people of other backgrounds across the West. It's alternative. It's fake alternative media. What it is, it's alternative media. They're gatekeepers. They keep people that are starting to wander over to alternative media, but they wander over to another thing controlled by establishment. Similar to Infowars or Mark Dice. And I didn't used to say Mark Dice is a shill, but now I see that how Mark Dice is continuing to support Trump even after the strikes on Syria. In fact, I saw that he was defending the strikes on Syria, I believe, on Facebook recently. And he used to talk, he toned it a lot way down with his talks about New World Order. Because, he used to talk about how the New World Order rigs the elections and the New World Order runs everything. Runs everything in the United States. Another thing that he also used to mention was I don't think he always used to label himself as a conservative. Now that he's pretty much aligned himself with the mainstream conservative community. And what I could see next step happening is that people like Jones and Dice, they could probably go mainstream or whatever, go on to make like a alternative channel of Fox or whatever, like Fox Extreme or something. They'll be their own channel. They'll put Alex Jones and Mark Dice together, or whatever. Those two, honestly, they're the conservative versions of Cenk Uygur, who's like the Young Turks and the left wing, gatekeepers that keep people that are wandering over to that side from actually going to any kind of a factual source. And what I have to say about Cenk Uygur is that he used to work for MSNBC. That should be pretty obvious. It's similar to like Glenn Beck also, is that people think Glenn Beck's any source of different from the mainstream media. He worked for Fox for a long time, but now it became obvious, especially when he started to support Hillary Clinton, and when he became a never Trumper for all the wrong reasons. Glenn Beck made himself very obvious. I don't think many people consider him alternative media anymore. Glenn Beck, Mark Dice, Alex Jones. This is the kind of people to look for when you're talking about the alternative media. That's the Simpo, a lot of the stuff. And Alex Jones, I think that he used to be not that long ago. He used to talk about how the elections were rigged or whatnot, and how they control both the Republican and Democratic parties. And now you see Alex Jones is actually Alex Jones is defending Trump still. I believe he's still defending Trump even after the strikes in Syria, which for a lot of people was the time to abandon. If they see that, a lot of the people that, especially that had anti-Israel leanings, they see that Trump's fulfilling the agenda that Israel wants inside of Syria, the Greater Israel agenda, which is a country from the Nile to the Euphrates River, which is from Egypt all the way to Iraq. So Syria has to go for the eventual completion of the Greater Israel Project. And people think that it's not real, that the Greater Israel Project is it's just something that a conspiracy theorist hatched up or whatever. But it's actually pretty well known. That's what Herzl and some of the original Zionist founders had planned for their project, for their grand scheme that they were thinking of when they created the State of Israel originally. And to all the people that are listening tonight, by the way, the call-in number is going to be 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. And, with France's recent string of terror attacks that they've had, they had the 11/13/15 attack, they had the Charlie Hebdo attack, they had the attack last summer. and they've had this recent attack, it's getting suspicious. And I think that pretty much what's happening is the elite is feeling that they're losing their grasp on France and that they're doing whatever in order to may scare / intimidate the people of France, and continue to accept martial law and stricter measures to stop the terrorists. But as I say, Le Pen's solution, and what seems to be different, is that to stop intervening in these countries and also stop supporting the Syrian rebels. She wants to cut off at the source, and I don't think she wants to do all these ridiculous security measures and all these other things that are just there to, it's locking down the country and making France lose their identity. I don't think Le Pen wants France to lose their identity. Le Pen wants to see a France that, of past, not the France of recent times, where blindly following the United States into whatever intervention, continuing to restrict the liberties of its civilians in the name of fighting terrorism. And also, but what is concerning is that if she is defending colonialism or whatnot, will be France's actions in Africa. That they've been long involved in Africa and countries like Mali, and that they've been a piece towards NATO's tinkering with Africa. Will Le Pen still want France to be involved with Africa? Actually, I would say NATO. It seems to be almost, their independent military, actually, that seems to be going to countries like Mali or whatnot. But will they continue to interfere with these countries, or will Le Pen take a step back, as well as taking a step back with what's going on in the Middle East? And I think that that's going to be the case. I think that, I think that might not be the case. The fact is that, the France's role in Africa has been able to gather them a lot of revenue over the years, and also has been able to bring a lot of resources back to Africa. I don't know if they can just cut off, all their colonial interest throughout Africa. And also, you have to remember they have an interest over here in the Americas. They have French Guiana. So France still continues to hold overseas territories to this day. I don't see France is pushing away from that now. And I believe there is actually a push inside the French Guiana to become independent. And it's the last European colonial territory in mainland South America, last European colonial department in mainland South America. There's still some European colonial territories throughout the Caribbean, but there's none in actually South America besides that one, French Guiana, to this day. And it's right there in that corner was Guyana and Suriname. It's actually on the furthest it's furthest east out of those 5 countries on the north, and then actually Brazil kind of goes to the east of French Guiana. If you look at South America, they all used to be former colonies. Spain controlled the majority of the continent. Portuguese controlled a large chunk that's now Brazil. Guyana used to be controlled by the British, and Suriname used to be controlled by the Dutch. Now there's French Guiana. So there was multiple different European interests over the years that were interested in the same that were interested in the same area, and there was a few different liberators, but Simon Bolivar liberated a large chunk of it from the Spanish in the early 1800s. He was able to liberate a lot of Northwest South America. But when it comes to France, and Le Pen could possibly be similar to a character like de Gaulle or whatnot. De Gaulle was under de Gaulle, Algeria was finally liberated, and de Gaulle, there was some massive stances that were taken against the establishment in the West during his presidency. But de Gaulle was definitely an abnormal leader when it came to Western leaders at the time, and it was at the time of LBJ and before him, Kennedy. In fact, I'm not exactly sure over the years. I have to look that up. But that would probably be a comparable. Some people have even tried to make little comparisons of Le Pen to Joan d'Arc or whatnot. I think that Le Pen will be able to could live up to some of these expectations. But I have to wonder that she even was to do the one thing with the dual Israeli citizenship and stop dual Israeli citizens from having their dual Israeli citizenship, that they might be able to take her out and do an assassination possibly, as they've done with people before. And think about what happened to JFK, that they could do something like that to Le Pen. But that's even if Le Pen was to win on May 7th. Le Pen's chances are low. I would say that it's probably at the most 30%. Apparently there's a lot of undecided voters going into the election. And looking back at that, De Gaulle was the president of France from 1959 to 1969. So it was all throughout the 1960s practically. He died about a year after his exit from politics. And he was involved with the French military from 1912 to 1944. So he actually was in World War I and World War II. Reading a little bit about him is that he was a decorated officer in World War I, wounded several times and taken as prisoner in Verdun. During the interwar period, he advocated mobile armored divisions. During the German invasion of May 1940, he led an armored division which counterattacked the invaders. And looking also at de Gaulle's, de Gaulle was also against the war in Vietnam, which he is kind of ironic because just a few years before, France was the country that was fighting the Vietnam War. Pretty much what had happened is the United States, was passed the baton when the French lost it a few years prior, and it was split into North and South Vietnam in 1954. He also supported an independent Quebec, which also kind of pissed off Canada, I guess. And he was reelected in 1965. And he actually had to resign. He kind of had to resign. Apparently, was after a referendum in which he promoted more decentralization. He was also kind of against the European community, and he opposed any development of a supranational Europe. He wanted Europe to be of sovereign nations, which is pretty much against the globalist idea of consolidation. That's one way, is towards a open borders European Union with no real borders between each other. Le Pen opposes that. Le Pen also seems to oppose the role of France in the European Union altogether. And there's a lot of talk of a Frexit happening under Le Pen. Le Pen's also, when it comes to her economics, she does seem more of left-leaning than anything. A lot of people like to say that Le Pen is it's just one of the same of any other politician when it comes to economics, but actually, it doesn't seem to be the case. She actually seems to be a pretty critical towards corporations, seems to be pretty critical towards the well, the corporations that are exploiting the French workers' interests. I mean, of course, I can say a lot of good things, but of course, I'm going to be highly skeptical of Le Pen just because there are the similarities between her and Trump, and at the same time, it is a Western politician. To me, it's almost like I think that she is real, that she will not win on May 7th, and that ultimately Macron will win out, and that's what it kind of appears is going to happen. But there's that slight, twinge of hope, thinking that maybe this is different, and Le Pen could appear, and then Le Pen will, will continue what she said during the campaign and help Russia out, and maybe that will provide Russia with a very important ally in Western Europe, as they seem to be practically vacant of allies in Western Europe. Le Pen could be a fortress of hope for Western Europe, and maybe it'll spread over to Spain, and maybe a party like Podemos could come in, and will be one more against the establishment, and then possibly some of the Northern European countries could start to switch over, and maybe one day even Germany. Even though I think that Germany is similar to Britain, where they don't really seem to have any kind of credible opposition. Germany's closest thing might be Die Linke, and Britain's, Britain, I don't know, might come out of the Labour Party, but the Labour Party is so splintered at this point, and I don't know if Jerry Corbyn's actually somebody that could be taken seriously. I know that Jeremy Corbyn doesn't seem to be super friendly with Putin, so it's hard to take Jeremy Corbyn seriously. Fillon, a lot of people were saying at one point that Fillon was going to be, could potentially create better relations between France and Russia. But I think that the fact is that showing that he'll vote for Macron in the end rather than Le Pen shows that he was one of the establishment all along. Mélenchon, I wonder what's going to be his vote in the second round. But also, and this also comes a couple of weeks before another election, but I don't think it's as pivotal as the Iranian election, because ultimately one that's going to be friendly to the Ayatollah is going to be elected. It's not like there's going to be a surprise where a pro-Western candidate comes about. So I think that we're pretty much safe there. But the message that Iran wants to put out the world will be probably conveyed, whether people want a more diplomatic leader like Rouhani, or maybe somebody like Aja Ahmadinejad, even though the Aja Ahmadinejad's been disqualified for running in the election, which is kind of annoying because Aja Ahmadinejad seemed to actually been able to, scare the West. And the fact is, I guess they want to continue to have a total diplomatic approach. Rouhani's been very diplomatic, but I don't know if they can continue to have that. Aja Ahmadinejad announced, despite the Supreme Leader warning him, he came back into the race, but then later he had to drop out when he was told that he was disqualified from running the 2017 election, I guess because he was too polarizing. But Aja Ahmadinejad probably could also have challenged Rouhani. Now it's going to come down to probably Rouhani ultimately winning, saying with not too much of a challenge from the other five major candidates. So actually, one of the candidates comes from, I think, one of the parties that Aja Ahmadinejad at one point belonged to, or they have two different sides in the Iranian election. They have the principalists like Aja Ahmadinejad or whatnot, or the reformists like Rouhani. And some of the other candidates, I mean, these all are not really anybody that's really known, I don't think. Maybe inside of Iran they know, but it's like no one that people here in the West know, so I don't think that it's like they have too much of a I don't think these candidates have too much of a chance, to be honest, compared to Rouhani, that seems to be pretty well liked. But I think at the same time that his signing of the Iran deal was a major concession to the West, considering that considering what it gave to the West, which is that the fact that they can inspect at any time, and it was also, what's the conditions of the economic sanctions that weren't even lifted. I mean, the United States ultimately violated the agreement in the end. It's kind of a bad idea to sign an agreement that they knew was going to be violated in the end. But there was one of the people, was the current mayor of Tehran, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who's running as a principalist, as well with Ibrahim Raisi. I mean, apparently these people are somebody in Iran, but I don't, they're not really names that I'm too familiar with. Apparently, Rouhani's vice president is running, which I believe he'd be a reformist if he was under the Rouhani. But I have to be honest, I mean, I might have seen these names and probably forgotten. I mean, seeing how long these names are or whatever. Not easy to remember names for sure. But Iran's election's coming up, I think, on May 19th. There's going to be there's going to be some coverage on Press TV. They'll have a couple of televised debates or whatnot. But the candidate that Ahmadinejad also originally bragged, I guess, that he wasn't allowed to run either, because it looks like there's only 6, with Bakai, who's eventually, I guess, disqualified, and Ahmadinejad ultimately decided to run. I guess before they're both disqualified. I think that at first that many candidates had announced, but the supreme leader cut down only to the ones that he believed would be beneficial to Iran. And I guess Ahmadinejad wasn't what he considered to be beneficial to Iran. By the way, is that there's a supreme leader system in Iran where the supreme leader decides who runs in the presidential election. It's not exactly a democracy, but at the same time, probably the people, truth be known, have more say in their election over there in Iran than they have with than people have with the elections here in the United States. And also going on next month or so, well, actually we already hit it. We just hit the 100-day mark for Trump. But apparently Trump's approval ratings, which doesn't really mean too much, it's polls and whatnot, but apparently Trump is one of the most disliked presidents, or the most disliked president ever after 100 days, I think, like in history. I think he only had like 41% approval ratings. Usually the presidents have a much higher level of approval rating. And I'm not exactly sure why. What's the media's what exactly was the media's constant criticism of Trump at times with these different things of the Trump-Russia connection. I'm not sure I think it's to stir up. I think it's to stir up tension here in the United States between the Trump and the pro-Trumpers and the anti-Trumpers, partially, and at the same time, I think it's the maybe scapegoat in the future, possibly Donald Trump, or whatever happens, what the elites decide to do in the next couple of years, which is if a major war was to break out, to say that it was on the nut job that is Donald Trump. But I don't really see Donald. I mean, I don't know. I see potentially Donald Trump getting more approval as the election or as his term goes on. In fact, apparently some of his some approval went up when he actually got when he struck Syria, which is alarming that a lot of people would support neocon maneuvers over there in Syria. And that's the thing that boosts his numbers, not him actually getting many of these other things done, such as talk about bringing jobs back to America and, pressing on these different corporations to bring the jobs back. And, the talks of potentially putting tariffs or whatever on imported goods back to America on companies that left, such as Ford or whatever major company that was leaving. But instead, we've got aggression in Syria, and it's weird how the plan for Syria in a way has more Obama written on it than the actual plans during the Obama administration themselves. When it talks about dividing and May surgically striking or entering Syria one way or another. Remember back during the time of the Syrian war, or when the Syrian war was or 2013, when the United States almost entered Syria for the first time. It was just the same narrative practically, the same kind of the same accusations were being thrown against Assad, that he had used chemical weapons on his own people, and that the United States government had to do something about it. It was pretty much like the weapons of mass destruction lie. It's the same thing that's been repeated again, now going into the 2017, this 2017 confrontation with Syria. At the same time, it's a gateway towards Iran, and potentially if they were actually to get into a war with Iran, just remember that a war with Iran is going to be 15 times worse than any war with Iraq, and their military capabilities are much more superior than the Iraqis had back in 2003, and then back in 1991. Also, remember how poorly funded and also the low morale that the Iraqi military has is that's not the case as Iran. And also that there's the possibility with all this that the Russians intervene, but I don't think that's going to happen, because I know that they'll show restraint. They've shown a lot of restraint in Ukraine. I think that if they can show restraint there, they can show restraint in they can show restraint here in this situation. And they need to, because I think that eventually, talk about the grand scheme of things, that there's potential that the United States and Russia will have a showdown in the future. But I think that ultimately, in current times, right now, that they need to avoid, because I don't think that the Russian military is probably quite built up enough to the point where they could take on the United States military. Who knows what they have in secret? Who knows what the United States military has been developing in secret all these years? And there's all these declassified weapons. There's all these many. There's all these projects that they work on in secret. So who knows what they have? By the way, if anybody wants to call in, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296, here at Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J, tonight, and talking about what's going on in the French election, and just overall in Syria and whatnot, and also in all around the world. Venezuela right now, apparently things are heating up, and there was a massive protest against Maduro that happened, I think Tuesday or something like that. And what's funny is that it's matched up by a probably equally as big, or actually made larger, protest by the Chavistas. And the media did not cover that. You didn't see the media talk about that, but you saw the media was constant coverage of the protest against Maduro, when different right-wing medias, and also across the internet, you saw a lot of coverage about the protest against Maduro, but you didn't see anything about the Chavistas counter rally. And it doesn't look like the Chavistas are willing to, are not going to concede towards the violence of the Maduro supporters, anti-Maduro supporters, the Capriles supporters, and got that mixed up. But what was alarming is apparently I think that during one of the rallies by the Capriles supporters, the opposition, is that there was a children's hospital or something that was attacked by them. There's been all kinds of violence throughout these protests, and Enrique Capriles, who his connections to Venezuela are sketchy at best. And what I mean by that is that Enrique Capriles is probably might not even be Venezuelan himself. In fact, he might have actually been born in Colorado, some people say. It's at least a rumor that goes around in Venezuela. But even that's not too important. What's important is that what he's done as the leader of the opposition. What we've seen a lot of is that he kisses ass to the United States, he kisses ass to American imperialism, and he forgets totally about the period prior to the Bolivian Revolution, which was the 1970s and 80s under Carlos Andrés Perez and the other leaders that surrounded him. I think, Rafael Caldera, who was the president in between Andrés Perez and Chavez. And Rafael Caldera, he also led, actually, I think, like the late 60s, early 70s, Rafael Caldera, and he was terrible. The whole era was terrible. It was led, one of the highlights of it is the Carazaco that happened, which were 3,000 leftist protesters, up to potentially that number, were gunned down and killed by the right-wing dictatorship. And also that was preceded by looting, and many of the things that they talk about is happening in Venezuela right now, which exaggerated by the mainstream media, and also at the same time is created by other factors. The shortages, the actual problems have been created by other factors rather than the what has been told on the mainstream media, which is they say that's the ineptness and the corruption of the Maduro government, in quotations. Not that the Maduro government definitely seems to have a degree of incompetence, but is it really causing everything that's happening here, or whatever's happening here? But there's actually the supermarket chains and corporations hostile to the Maduro government have been accused of hoarding food, and also there's sanctions against the United States or against Venezuela from the United States, and that makes it hard for Venezuela to receive certain products. So there's multiple things here in play. Similar to like when the blockade was going on, still to this day the blockade still goes on against Cuba, that it was hard to get certain products in Cuba, and it led to many difficulties, and that seems to be the problem again. Is similar to the Cuban blockade, and I think also for a long time they had something similar against Vietnam. I know you couldn't travel there, and it made the recovery after the Vietnam War very difficult for the people of Vietnam. And also looking back at what's happened in Venezuela in the last 15 years and the craziness, the coup that I was talking about, I think it was last week I was talking about the coup that happened in Venezuela on April 13th of 2002, and all these many terrible things that have happened, and these challenges that the people of Venezuela have had to go through, is that it's really these protests, and these, they ultimately have just led to, we could say, riots and all the damage that have been created or whatnot. I think that eventually Venezuela will recover, and I think will come to an end, even though it seems to be now over 3 years we've been talking about this. And they actually started, I think, like February 2014. And I see a lot of the people in the alternative media have been deceived by the media in order to support this. They think that, this is a they see Maduro and they see the Chavez as, similar to our government, but they're not similar to our government. And they forget to mention how these people, opposed the apartheid in Israel, against the Palestinian people. They forget to mention how these people oppose also oppose the New World Order plan. These people, they kicked out the Rothschilds there, the Venezuelan government. They were able to do many big accomplishments, and they were able to repatriate their gold. I don't know if they still have control of their gold, but I know they repatriated their gold. So they were able to do these massive feats. But the people that are the people here, the people in some of the people in alternative media will continue to. You could even mention it to, I guess, some of the, especially I see some of the people like alt-right or whatever that definitely every time that there's a internet argument or whatever, and they want to put down the Bernie supporters or whatever, they bring up Venezuela. And how I say it is like, hey, as a Chavista, don't compare Hugo Chavez to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is just a shill gatekeeper Zionist that was able to garner a lot of support here. The only thing I have to say about Bernie Sanders, when it comes to the only thing good I guess I could say when it comes to Bernie Sanders, or during his entire run, is that I think it did bring together a lot of people that were potentially different of thinking, but at the same time they got sheepdogged, and a lot of those people ended up voting for Hillary, and they got recycled back into the system. It's like a lot of the people that would never vote again, that were conservatives or whatnot, that were dissatisfied with the Democrat Party and even the Republican Party, ended up voting for Donald Trump. I know, it's crazy, but it actually happened again. And it happened with them. It happened with Cenk Uygur, I think, during this election, who I think was kind of a burner early on, and then he ended up going to the Hillary side, especially as the race heated up, and to oppose Donald Trump. I remember there was that big clash between him and Alex Jones, and also Roger Stone was there, who was like a Trump advisor. Quite a few things, actually. He worked in Washington, D.C. for like 40 years and kind of like a unorthodox government advisor or whatnot. And, there was a lot of scandals around him. But at the same time as that, Roger Stone also was going to run as a libertarian for Senate down here in Florida. But I think that ultimately Paul Stanton took that nomination. He was going to run, I think, in 2016 last year. But Paul Stanton got Paul Stanton ultimately got the nod. There's also another very interesting person that was going to run for Senate, which was August Invictus. He had some Latin name or whatever. He also was I don't know what was the deal. He was says he did pagan rituals or something like that. The guy was just a total nutty guy. But ultimately he didn't get the nod by the Libertarian Party to run. But actually, I think it chased quite a few people out of the Libertarian Party. And, there was, for example, somebody I knew that I think was the Libertarian Party chair down here for the county. And she ended up leaving because of the moves by Libertarian Party of Florida to, at first, which they were even entertaining the idea of this guy running for Senate for down here in Florida. And at the same time, I think there was another person that ran for Congress down here as a libertarian. I think he left the party because of that. It was kind of a whole big deal, but I was actually kind of somewhat involved with the party back in 2014 when Lucas Overby ran for Congress down here, and Lucas Overby ended up losing 75-25. Pretty much the Bill Young clone, which is David Jolly, ended up running for Congress. Now since then it's already changed over again. David Jolly had won the seat via special election against Lucas Overby and Alex Sink, who was a former gubernatorial candidate, Florida. But she lost, Jolly won, and Overby only got like 6% in the special election. Despite though that he got 6%, despite joining in very late, and or I think they all joined in pretty late because it was a special election that was called. But at the same time, it's hard for a third party. Third party needs some time to get their name out there. They're not as known. People a lot of times will just vote for the person that's known, but Overby wasn't known, so it was hard for him to get any support on that one. But then when it was just him versus Jolly, he only got 25%, I think, because people didn't want to vote for the third party. They saw Republican versus Libertarian. They wanted to vote for a Republican or Democrat option. I think a lot of Democrats ended up voting for Jolly in the end, but and that was despite at first. I mean, something weird happened because there was, I think, polls or whatever that showed Overby was in like 3% at one point, and he only gets 25% of the vote. He won one precinct, which they had worked very closely with, but I did some canvassing or whatever down here, and it actually seemed like I got a lot of warm responses. Actually, talk about canvassing. I did on Wednesday. I went around here. There's a law school nearby, like within a few blocks of my house. There's a Stetson University's law school. They have their main campus out in DeLand, Florida, which is like in the interior of the state. But they have their they have their law school right here, and in Gulfport, Florida. So I had a little leaflet that Caleb Maupin made. He wrote an article for Mint Press News showing the lies of the Syrian war or whatnot. So I printed one out from my phone, took the copy I made, took it down to the library there, and used their copy machine, which is actually conveniently like the closest copy machine to my house. So used their copy machine, made 20 copies, and then I just went outside and started passing them out to people. And I actually got like 17, 18 people to take a flyer. And it was like over an hour and a half. I think I was in between classes or whatever because there wasn't too many people walking around. I saw some people like right when I went out saying that they had to get to the last class or whatever. So I think it was I started right at the start of class, and after a while just kind of got impatient. Plus I was running out of copies, but by 6:30 or whatever I went back, passed around quite a bit. I actually I did a video of it. There were some people, of course, that turned it down. Some people were actually intrigued by it. I think I got a professor to take a flyer. And, of course, I was kind of surprised the security didn't hassle me. It was when I saw the security guard. I just walked through. I just kind of I literally did like a stereotypical like whistle. Like I was like in the movie or whatever when the bad guy is up to no good or whatever. Or maybe even the protagonist is up to something. They's walking around or doing something. Or I mean, he'll whistle, and that was me walking past the security guard. The security guard ultimately, I guess, didn't catch on or didn't give a shit enough in order to stop me, and that was only like in a pretty small area. I was able to get those people to take the flyer. Got into a kind of a minute or two conversation actually with one guy, and that was actually when I was taking the video. I took 2 videos. I guess I might post them up on Facebook. The thing was that they were bad. And, I was stupid is like all the thought that went into the rest of that, and to talk about Syria and the comparison of the Syrian lie to the chemical weapons, the WMD lie, Saddam. I was talking about on video about, how the lie of Gulf of Tonkin and all these many things, all this other thinking I did. But I didn't think, what? I could use my outer camera to film the people that I'm actually talking to in order to have a better video and also the show where I'm walking at, and you can see what the people I'm approaching. But no, I'm going to use the inner camera in order to look at myself talking. And when I'm talking to people, you just see me handing the paper over and saying stuff, but you don't see the actual person. But at the same time, it might make people uncomfortable, whatever, if they're being filmed. And these people are all law students. I don't know how. I don't know exactly the legalities of all that. If I was to film these people without their permission on a private. Well, actually, those are public sidewalks or whatever. But at the same time, if I was to post it, maybe they would know all this stuff, and I would have a lawsuit coming. I don't know. Maybe it was for the better I didn't film these people. But at the same time, actually, at one point I was passing on private property, or no, actually not. I think that was public property because it's kind of weird. Is that the law school has a public library. It's public. We have a public library in our city, and then we have this public library, but it's a law library, so you couldn't just find like any books or whatever. But that's not what I'm there for, anyways. If I go there, it's for computers, use an actual desktop with fast internet, copy machine, that kind of thing. They have that there, and you pay 5 cents and you get a copy done or whatever. So that's why that was perfect. That was the perfect thing. I could make the copies right there and walk right out the door and start passing them out to people. And of course, there was a few people who were like, "Oh yeah, I already know what's going on in Syria," and of course, what came to mind is you probably don't. I mean, I really doubt that they, have the. I don't know. It's just I'm always gonna be skeptical. I'm like figuring that they haven't read the many different angles that I've read or many people in alternative media read. The other thing is that it's not like I just read RT and Press TV and got my sources from there. I've seen different angles. I've seen the Salafists on Al Jazeera. I've seen the people from MSNBC and CNN, what they have to say about the Syrian war, and it's different things. It's kind of MSNBC pushes the narrative that this is like a direct Russia thing or whatever, Russia to Syria, and that it's Russia that's ended up killing these people. And that it's all Trump working with Russia means that he's also partially complicit in what's going on in Syria. That's MSNBC's angle, and there's Fox's angle, which is, these are the Assad governments are pretty much like Saddam all over again, and that the Assad government's helping sponsor Hezbollah, which is against Israel, which, the Assad government actually does help as Hezbollah. They are helping Syria, and Hezbollah is not a terrorist group, and I'll say that on air, is that Hezbollah is a resistance group that opposes Zionism, but I would not call it a terrorist group in the same essence of Al-Qaeda or ISIS or these other actual terrorist groups that come to mind when you think of terrorist group. Of course, Hezbollah is labeled as a terrorist organization by our government, and despite the fact that they've been fighting ISIS and they've been kicking the ass of ISIS in Syria, in fact, Hezbollah has sent over a lot of fighters, I think, starting in like 2013. And Hezbollah's Hezbollah is a very controversial group in the West, but how I see them is that they are a legitimate political group that we should definitely talk to, and we shouldn't be labeling automatically as a terrorist group. And I think it's important that when it comes to the solution in Syria, that Hezbollah gets a seat at the table. Definitely, they have harsh, what people might say they might be a tough stance against the West in general, but they're talking about the Western governments. I think it's similar to many of these groups that are lambasted in the media, is that they have a tough stance against the government, but not the people of America in general. But yeah, they fought in the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. They fought against the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Israel occupied a strip of Lebanon, which was controlled by the South Lebanon Army, which is a Lebanese militia that's supported by Israel. Hezbollah was conceived by Muslim clerics. It was with support of Iran. That's where they're originally from, is Iran. And they have a lot originally supported in support of Ayatollah Khamenei, the original supreme leader of Iran. Now it's Khamenei, slightly different, but Ayatollah Khamenei, Ayatollah Khamenei was the first, and now I think it's I can't think of what the first name of I say Ali Khamenei, I think it's the name of the current supreme leader of Iran, who's been there since '89. one of the things that they were enlisted in their manifesto. It listed the objectives of the expulsion of the Americans, the French, and their allies definitely from Lebanon, putting in the colonialist entity on our land. Hezbollah also waged a guerrilla campaign in South Lebanon in 2000. And as a result, Israel withdrew from Lebanon on May 24th, 2000. And the SLA collapsed and surrendered. Backed by Iran, Hezbollah fought against the Serbian forces during the Bosnian War. Hezbollah's military strength has grown significantly. And some people say that Hezbollah is more like the official military of Lebanon rather than the Lebanese army. And they control a big part of Lebanon. The actual Lebanese government is usually pro-Israel, pro-Western. And it's like when me and Scott Rickard came over here back in January. Scott Rickard, when he came over, he was talking about how Lebanon is usually friendly to the West, and it's one of those countries like Egypt that's been a stronghold of Western imperialism and Western influence. And Lebanon being where it is pretty strategic because it's right by Israel. If they were to go anti-Israel, that would be a massive step against the Zionist regime, as they would definitely be pressured with Syria right there. Another thing that's happened this week is apparently I think Israel was attacking Syria again. Which is another step towards World War III. I think that we're getting very close towards the big moment, is where this goes into a actual war and not just strikes here and there. I think that ultimately a United States strike will determine that actually happening, and that might be from the United States strike being much larger than the one we saw against the air base, with like 50,000 people. But looking back, also, a little talk about Hezbollah here is that it was also partially continued revolution, the Islamic Revolution in 1979 in Iran. I see these idiots. I'm not even sure why people even say that. They say that the Islamic Revolution of '79 was backed by the CIA or whatnot, and that's obviously a lie. You've seen how hard that they have attacked Iran since 1979. There would be no reason that the United States would have done a revolution in Iran. They already had a leader that was friendly to the United States. His name was the Shah, and he was there they actually brought him to power. That was where the CIA actually intervened in 1953 against the democratically elected president that became the president after the people overthrew the Shah for the first time. Then they overthrew the Shah again in 1979, and that ended a long period of United States influence of Iran. For before that, Iran had been a long time a American ally, and with the Shah, it even received one of the presidents I think he received from the United States was a golden Gillette razor. They had been it was pretty much the Shah pretty much acted just like the Gulf states, with a monarch that reigned over a large oil source. And the Shah, the Shah was much more dictatorial than the current regime, and there definitely seems to be faults with the current regime. But of course, you have to see what is actual news and what is propaganda about, supposed stories of executions of gays or whatnot that go on. And my friend Caleb Maupin went over to Iran not too long ago, and he had a much different story to tell about Iran than compared to the what the mainstream media has told you of Iran, of this very intolerant and this very repressive state that supposedly Iran is. but it seemed to be a open, thriving democracy in many ways, and definitely a country with democratic values and a country that is very modern compared to many countries in the Middle East. Of course, one of the major things that makes Hezbollah controversial is what their ultimate position on Israel, which is that Israel must be gotten rid of. The state of Israel must cease to exist, which is something that I share in belief that the state of Israel cannot exist in the future. It must be a Palestinian country that's secular, that Jews and Arabs can live peacefully, similar to how it was in the past, that Jews and Arabs lived very peacefully until Zionism came about in around 1948. And Hezbollah says its continued hostilities against Israel are justified as reciprocal to Israeli operations against Lebanon and as retaliation for what they claim is Israel's occupation of Lebanese territory. Even though that Israel withdrew from Lebanon in 2000, their withdrawal was ratified by the United Nations, if that actually means anything. Lebanon considers the Sheba Farms, which is a 10-mile piece of land captured by Israel from Syria in 1967 to be, and considered by the UN to be Syrian territory occupied by Israel to be Lebanese territory. Additionally, Hezbollah claims that three Lebanese prisoners are being held in Israel. Finally, Hezbollah considered Israel to be an illegitimate state. For that reason, they continue the hostilities against them. And of course, the United States likes to say, and Western countries like to say about Hezbollah, that they are anti-Semitic. However, the people at the top of Hezbollah deny this, and I think that's a worthy denial for sure. But, of course, the Wikipedia article, this is what they have to say. Among other actions, Hezbollah actively engages in Holocaust denial and spreads anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And they say, various anti-Semitic statements have been attributed to Hezbollah officials or whatever, which, again, I'm sure there might be some people inside the movement or whatever that harbor views hostile to Jews as a whole, but I think that the leaders are definitely don't seem to show anything of hatred towards Jews as a whole, and just to the Zionist state and what they've done to the Palestinian people and what they've done to the Middle East in general. At the same time, it's kind of funny. They also they compare their what they call propaganda to Hamas propaganda. But Hamas is actually, I believe, their allies in Syria are actually some of the Salafists, and Hamas has actually helped do some of the bidding of the Zionists when it comes to over there in Syria, and and also their sister group Muslim Brotherhood, or at least they used to be connected, the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Is that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt has done the United States bidding, and I think that's part of the plan is to continue to stir up tension over there while the United States supports both sides of the political conflict in Egypt between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Egyptian government. They're both United States backed. And this is one of the things that they said, apparently, that conflicting reports, so this is already where it starts to get a little sketchy on the details, but it says Al-Manar, the Hezbollah-owned and operated television station, accused either Israel or Jews of deliberately spreading HIV and other diseases to Arabs throughout the Middle East, which, if you're talking about the United States government spreading HIV to Africa or whatever, that doesn't actually seem to be too far-fetched. A lot of people believe that, and concerned that HIV seems to be a United States government creation rather than a just spontaneous disease that popped up. the incident was the lab or whatnot, but it was a disease that was being created in a lab. The HIV virus, I believe, was actually invented by the United States government for depopulation purposes on Africa and may potentially undesirable populations inside the United States, whatever which ones they picked, maybe the black population and some of the inner city populations in this country, where it became rampant. I don't think that I don't think that HIV was just something that happened. I think it was definitely an invented disease, and actually there's a patent for it. I believe if you look it up if you put in a patent number, there's like the U.S. patent website, and you put in a number. I don't know what the number is. You actually will find it. I'll have to look that up later. What's the patent number for HIV? And there was actually a guy that was apparently curing the HIV virus back in the late 90s, and then he ended up dead mysteriously. But I think that HIV being spread in the Middle East is not too far-fetched either, potentially by the United States government or the Israeli government for the purposes of depopulation and weakening the population as a whole. And Hezbollah pressured a private English school to drop the reading excerpts of the Diary of Anne Frank, which we all know what that's about. That's what it just kept going the same way what was going on. This was Hezbollah's Al-Manar television complaint asking how long Lebanon would remain an open arena for Zionist invasion of education. Which, while I have to, disagree if that was actually, that made the reading of the book as a whole should have been banned or whatever. But I think that ultimately Hezbollah has every right to push, not force perhaps, but just to push, what they believe is not made most beneficial for students to be reading. And also I have to say is that, I think that if we continue pushing the idea, there is a truth that the media has pushed the idea that only Jews suffered in World War II, or that the Jews were by far the only ones that suffered during the Nazi regime, not mentioning all the other victims of the Nazi regime, including the millions of Russians that were killed in World War II, and the fact that the gypsies and many other minorities that were killed by the Nazi regime. Also, I believe Christian minorities were killed by the Nazi regime, and even blacks suffered under the Nazi regime, the few blacks that were there. So there's a lot more than just, they try to make it seem like that they made by far the biggest victims of the war were the Jews, but that would be inaccurate. So I think that by, pushing the way of how the United States does education when it comes to World War II, definitely could set the stage for kids to have a pro-Zionist view of the world by believing that Jews are victims and that the Zionist state of Israel is only a consolidation prize or whatever for all the suffering that the Jewish people have went through. But if we look at it a different way, is that to understand one thing is that Israel and the Jews are not connected, is that Israel is a Zionist colonial project started by people that weren't even practicing Jews, and it was based on a belief that Jewish blood was superior. And there's many things that when you think about World War II or whatever and its connection with Israel, just remember that the Nazis were actually backers of the Zionist state, and they were the ones, if you'll ever look up the Havar Agreement, were the ones that started sending Jewish people to Palestine in order to conquer it. And they say that's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, whatever. There's a freaking paper that says that actually happened. Of course, I think at this point, when it comes to what I talk about, people will say that I'm about to be fitted for my Hugo Boss uniform already. So I'm already getting the Hugo Boss uniform, and they're already making a German version of my name. But that's going to be the future. Is if I ever get bigger on the radio, people will be saying my name all German like this, emphasize how Nazi-ish or whatever my views are. It'll be what would be instead of Chris? It should be Klaus. Klaus. Instead of Jackson, something more German sounding like that. Jackoff. Yeah, that was like a Jackhoff. Yeah, instead of that, it'll be Klaus Jackoff. That's my German name. Definitely Nico times to stop me from wandering off into the whatever tangent I'm going off on, but Klaus Jackoff. There it is. That's my German name from now on out. That's gonna be the Nazi name that people are gonna make for me or whatever whenever I get popular enough where they're making memes against me or. Anyways, 10:20 right now, and going back to what I was talking about earlier, the French election. Apparently, there was riots going on in Paris that were going on around the French election because of but they were pissed off with all the candidates that had run or whatnot. I saw it looked to be Antifa was there, and it's a group that I used to definitely support quite a bit, but I can't really support them anymore. As the Antifa seemed to be a front group for it's from just a front group for to cause tension and division. Is that I think that the higher ups, the elites, the New World Order, I think that they might have used some of these people in their agenda in order to stir up tension here in the United States, as we've seen with the Berkeley riots, them versus the Trump supporters. And that's what all I could think of when I saw these people at the Berkeley riots, is that both sides are idiots. These people are all idiots. That they're participating in this mess. People are falling right into the idea of divide and conquer. And despite the fact of all the warnings that are out there and all the information that's available on the internet, they continue playing these stupid games between. Right now, it's the Trumpers versus the anti-Trumpers, and now that you see these different riots that went on or whatnot, and then you see the same people, on both sides. Is that it's like all these libtards, these snowflakes, they need to learn how to accept that Trump's president, and then the other side is that they'll say that but the conservatives can't acknowledge that Trump is a Russian puppet or whatever, which at least that's went away for the most part, is that they hold Russia-Trump connection. I mean, that shit was driving me insane every time someone mentioned it or whatever. Every time I turned on MSNBC, it's like, oh, Trump might have met with a Russian spy back in the year 2012. We have proof right here. Oh, Trump might have talked to Putin personally. I'm like, don't drag Putin into this, please. Don't. It's like Putin's already been through enough, and now you're going to put up some bullshit that he has some secret connection between him and Trump. And then all these pictures was like Trump on the back of a horse was Donald Trump. I mean, it's all silliness. I mean, to say that he had the connection, it's like, please, he's been through enough. We don't need to keep pushing these false lies about supposed connection. And looking at the right now the poll numbers between Le Pen and Macron or whatever, Le Pen actually fell behind a little bit, and she actually only got 7.6 million votes compared to Macron was about 8.5 million votes. So she lost by, I guess, a considerable margin according to the official results, which Le Pen is at 21.4% and Macron at 23.9%. But at least Le Pen will move on to the second round. Fillon finished in third at 19.9%. Mélenchon at 19.6%. And then Hamon, 6.3% of the vote. Dupont, Aigon, 4.7% of the vote. And then it just trails off into the really the unknown candidates. But the Hamon, by the way, is at the Socialist Party, so that's like the ruling party Hollande's part of. Finished a miserable 5th place, actually. And Fillon, which also represents another establishment party, Fillon, I think, might belong to Sarkozy's old party, 19.9%. Mélenchon, one of the outsider candidates that really came up out of nowhere, 19.6%. Definitely was kind of unexpected, but will not move on to the second round. It's now, I guess, official. Le Pen and Macron are going to move on to the second round on May 7th, and that's exactly 2 weeks from now. But with Marine Le Pen's candidacy, I wonder what she'll be rallying on these last 2 weeks. Le Pen's kind of I gotta say, it's kind of weird as a woman politician. It's kind of one of those things that it's kind of almost it's unnoticeable about her, is that you almost kind of forget all the other things that she says. She doesn't really capitalize on that. That's not one of her part of her agenda. She's definitely not what you could say, I guess, as a feminist. She just wants to be like any other candidates, and she hasn't, played that card, which is good. But even though, honestly, when it comes to a lot of times with, think about when it comes to Le Pen, is that it's definitely very obvious she's a woman. I have to say, for her age, not the worst looking woman. I mean, maybe not. She's not the level like Kirchner. Kirchner, like if you think about like hot female politicians, Kirchner was probably a few steps above Le Pen or whatnot. But I mean, like Kirchner, there's a little bit of that cougar, definitely. I could see. Le Pen's actually got she's got like a niece that's like 20 something that's in the Parliament of France. She's actually she's not half bad, I don't think. But I also saw another thing where it was apparently like Marine Le Pen's on Snapchat or whatever, and she was a video of her singing, which actually seeing that she was actually, I mean, it was actually, she didn't seem like she was the worst singer ever. I'm like, she might be talented, dude. She's got a little bit of the Putin effect in her, But Putin can do a little bit of everything. He can play the piano, he can sing, he can paint, he can also do all the manly stuff, go harpoon whales, he can go you can go playing with tigers or whatnot, and go gliding with all the wildlife. By the way, yeah, Marine Le Pen is the niece of Le Pen, of Marine Le Pen. She's actually only 27 right now, and yeah, she's all right looking. I'll say she's one of the youngest. She became the youngest French MP in modern political history, actually. She's been in the party since, I guess, she was 19. Back in 2008, she joined the party, and her spouse, it says divorce 2016. Okay, she's out in the open market. She's single. She's a free agent at the moment. Maybe we can pair up with I was gonna say, it's like, damn, Putin doesn't have a son. If we pair them up, maybe they can make some kind of European super leader for the future. Putin's son and Le Pen's niece or whatever. But I think Putin naturally just has a couple dollars or whatever. And though I have to say, it probably sucks to be anywhere connected to the Le Pen family right now because of all the controversy. She gets quite a bit of hate on the internet, I think. I mean, it's like a lot of people compare her to a French Trump, and of course anything like that is going to garner a lot of heat. Which, Trump, the closest thing to a European Trump I could think of was Geert Wilders. I mean, even had the crazy hair and everything, and his ideas were pretty crazy. I mean, Geert Wilders, though, he wanted to ban Islam from the Netherlands, and luckily, well, I mean, ultimately went to another establishment candidate, but luckily he lost last month's his campaign. Dear Wilder's I would also say Nigel Farage is probably, he's like the British equivalent to Donald Trump, and they seem to get along very well. Dear Wilders is a phony, and there's some connections were made between Le Pen and Geert Wilders, but I don't think they even like each other or liked each other. Geert Wilders is part of some party over there in the Netherlands, like super right wing, and he's got like he got the really crazy hair, and he speaks like broken English because there was like a clip that was showing him talking or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, we got to kick the Moroccan scum from our country. So that's not really his accent. I don't know why. That sound like an Arabic accent there. Moroccan scum from. See, I'm just gonna have to tinker through some accents here. I can't. That was actually going to Russian. I only have a few accents I could really do too well. So it's like expecting me to get the Netherlands accent a little bit above the expectations, but. I can also do a British accent but I have to like start off with like one sentence to get to the British accent. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it's like because they always are announcing the soccer games in English. Like if I want to watch, for example, Colombia, United States is on or whatever. If I want to watch the game with my dad or something who doesn't speak Spanish, speaks like a few words of Spanish, and instead of watching Colombia, United States on Spanish TV. Which is a totally different announcing style. They have like it's fast. It's like goal. And they go say goal for like 3 minutes or whatever. British, they when they announce the games, it's like it's like he kicks it over to the left. There you go. See, that's actually different than the usual word I use for it. But I guess if I can imagine being a British soccer announcer for a second, if I could, and then say whatever lines I need to say, then it actually works out. Or the one I usually say, like, he has pulled out his card of penalty. It appears to be a yellow card on the striker from Arsenal. I think I nailed it right there. Also, I did the Alex Jones impression pretty good on the radio one time, and it was not a co-host there, so they couldn't. And I tried to do it with my co-host later, and then I couldn't do it as good. I'm like, shit. It's like when there was no pressure on, I was able to do it, but when there was pressure on, I couldn't do it. But yeah, I could do my British accent. I can do you can also do like the Italian, like the Italian Brooklyn accent or whatever. I think I do that one pretty well. Like, hey, if you need a favor here, we always got you at Voice of Rebellion Radio. We do many favors. We do the favor of pushing the truth. You know what I'm saying? And then I can do I can of course do the redneck accent. I can do the usually because of imitating Bush or whatnot. We gotta stop them evildoers doing them. See, I didn't even do it there. Shit. I overloaded on the accents for the day. Anyways, we're at 10:33 here Eastern Time here on Voice of Rebellion Radio, and still talk about the French elections, and the French. I mean, they've had a pretty bad string of presidents, similar to like the United States. I mean, they're all puppets. It seems like going back to probably De Gaulle, but the last two have been pretty bad. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sarkozy was in some scandal with an underage girl, and then I think it was after his presidency though, and then Hollande, just a string of terrorist attacks that happened under his presidency, and just terrible leadership. He has one of the worst approval ratings in the history of French elections. I think at one point, a French president, he had like 14% at one point. I mean, his approval rating is like lower than like cockroaches or something. And probably in France, you might be able to find more supporters of the UK soccer team than you'd be able to find of supporters of a Hollande. Hollande has been a pretty crappy president all throughout. And François Hollande, despite being, you could say one of the most prominent officials in the world, as being the president of France, was not too popular in his own country. And he also ran into some scandals. Like one time, I think, in order just to piss off the Iranian leader, he says that he won't meet the Iranian leader unless you can have like bacon, wine, or something at the dinner. Talk about how Muslims, can't eat pork nor have alcohol. And he just said that, I think, just to piss off the Iranian official. One of the things that Hollande was there for was to legalize same-sex marriage by passing Bill number 344, reformed labor laws, and he did withdraw the French troops combat that were in Afghanistan. But he was a leading proponent. He was one of the people who was a leading proponent in the military intervention, the murder of Muammar Gaddafi. He sent troops to Mali, the Central African Republic, and some of his actions and opinions regarding EU mandatory migrant quotas have drawn some controversy for sure. There's also And also, as a member of G8, Hollande has struggled to revive the economy in France in ways that spark long-term economic stimulus by increasing taxes and seeing unemployment up to 10% as of December. However, his economic policies, and that was just December of last year, 2016. However, his economic policies have secured France as the most toured country in the world, which that doesn't really say anything. And he could have ran in this election, actually, but he decided not to, which he would have lost and been absolutely annihilated, probably just as bad as Hamon's numbers that were like at 6%. That would probably have been Hollande's numbers for only have 12% approval ratings. I'm sure that a lot of people would have voted for him if he had a different candidate they could have voted for. Some personal things also about Hollande is that during the presidency, he divorced, which he actually had divorced prior to that, just a few years later. And this is actually his third wife that he married during his presidency. So he had two first ladies, Valeria Trierweiler and Julia Gayet. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce the names. So that's who they're leaving behind. That's France's. That's the one that's going out. The question is, who comes in Le Pen or Macron. Macron will be a lot more the same, and Macron, I think, recently said that he's going to get Putin to respect him, which, what that means is that he thinks he's going to get Putin to fear him or whatever, and he thinks that by riding on the back of United States military intervention, he'll be able to scare Russia, by saying that the United States can defend us if it comes down to that. But I think in the end, there's nothing that's going to scare Putin. You can't face Putin, and I don't think that, when it comes to him or also whoever they might replace Putin, some people say Shoigu, Russia is pretty much safe from anything that France could do or even any Western European country could do. And I think that in many ways the Russian military is the strongest military in Europe. I mean, not just in Europe, in the world. I think that the Russian military is the strongest military force in Europe, and I would say they're probably one for the spirit of the military that they have there. It's probably the most inspired military in Europe, and at the same time, the spirit of the powers from the spirit of the military. I would say the weapons that they have recently been able to use their Armata tank, a brand new tank that they pulled out. So they went away from the T system of tanks to a new system of tanks. They have underwater rifles even. They have new stuff that actually works compared to the United States military. They have a lot of new stuff that doesn't seem to work, like the F-35 jet program that failed. And another thing about the Russian military that I think that puts them apart is the fact that how quickly they're able to have dealt with problems in the past. Is that, you look at the Georgian War, whatever, it took 6 days. Chechen War, they were able to wipe the floor with the terrorists in Chechnya Syria, they've been able to wipe the floor with the terrorists there. They have combat training similar, to the United States, with their combat tired. These people are combat worn down troops that the United States have. But the Russians have a lot of combat trained troops that are ready for a combat situation. So it's not like they're rusty or whatever, like perhaps maybe like the North Korean military, something that's never seen combat. Most of the troops, I think they might have seen a few here and there where they've sent troops to help out in whatever situation. I don't think they've been on too many foreign deployments, those troops, or the Iranian military that hasn't fought in any real wars. Well, some of those guys actually have fought in Syria, but besides those guys, the last time that a big portion of the military fought in a war was the Iranian-Iraq war. But there's been actually, I think at one point, over 15,000 troops who were in Iran from Iran were in Syria. So some of those guys definitely have combat training in any potential showdown between the United States and Iran or Syria. But the United States knows they don't want to face Russia in combat. Because Russia is probably, as long as there's no unconventional weapons used, such as nuclear weapons, they are the strongest military on the planet. Now, the United States does hold the biggest nuclear arsenal on the planet. And so that's why it's so ironic every time that you see the United States justifying, every time that justifying military intervention on a country because they say that country has nuclear weapons or is developing nuclear weapons, such as the Iranian narrative, is because, think about it, they have the biggest nuclear weapons arsenal on the planet. They allowed the Israelis to get nuclear weapons illegally. They're not part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And at the same time, the United States is the only country to have used 2 nuclear weapons, and you've seen that they used a weapon of the same magnitude of a atom bomb in Afghanistan just a few weeks ago. It was the Moab being used. The Moab has pretty much just as much potential for damage as the atom bomb. The ones that were used back in Japan in 1945. Now they don't even use, I don't think, what's called an atomic bomb. They use nuclear or hydrogen bombs. I think it's a different form of nuclear bomb. They were both those were nuclear weapons that were dropped on Japan, but they were not hydrogen bombs. They're much more powerful. I think the worst thing that the United States military has is like the B-80 or whatever, which is like 15 times more blast radius than the atomic bombs that were used in Japan, and way, way more powerful. But just because they're more powerful doesn't mean that they have much more radius of destruction. I think the worst bomb that was ever used is the Tsar Bomba, and that thing has like a 21-mile radius of total devastation. So probably for everything from out to like 50 miles, there might be damage, and the fallout range is probably ridiculous, thousands of miles or whatever, over 1,000 miles. But I mean, the Tsar Bomba could eliminate probably a small United States state, even though that the Tsar Bomba probably no longer exists. But that's why whenever we talk about nuclear warfare, there's no winner in any of those situations, because just one of those does that kind of damage. So imagine the United States using 4 of those or whatever. I mean, 4 of the B-80s could eliminate maybe a small province somewhere, some country. I mean, you talk about a few of these could destroy an entire country, and we're talking about thousands of these weapons being deployed. There's not going to be too many people that are going to survive to see the aftermath of that. One thing to keep in mind for the people that are survivalists and preppers or whatnot is that that apparently the air and water don't cross hemispheres. So if you're in the northern hemisphere and a nuke was to go off in the southern hemisphere, then you would the fallout shouldn't cross that hemisphere. And if, for example, if all goes to shit in the northern hemisphere, where all the nuclear powers exist, I believe, I don't think there's any nuclear powers in the southern hemisphere. So theoretically, in the event of a nuclear war, the southern hemisphere should remain rather unscathed unless they start attacking allies, the countries, or all the allies, the countries that are using the nuclear weapons. But if you're in the southern hemisphere, the fallout and all the nasty effects that happen from the northern hemisphere shouldn't cross over too easily. And actually, like the water, goes in big gyres. The Atlantic Ocean, there's two major gyres in the northern Atlantic Ocean, the southern Atlantic Ocean, and they're like a big circle, so they don't like cross. They only go by the equator, but they never like go past that point. In the air, I believe does the same thing. And in one hemisphere, everything goes clockwise, and the other hemisphere, everything goes counterclockwise. So it just like makes like a line. It's actually pretty bizarre how it works, but it's pretty cool. There's the basic marine science talking with the gyres, right? There's a term we learned or whatever, and then you also learn how the currents go different ways, and everything on the western side of continents are cold currents usually, while on the eastern side of currents you have the hot currents. That's why you have like the Gulf Stream is warm water that goes all up the east coast. Some of that basic geographic knowledge though could save your life one day if everything anything like that went down. But then again, it's like if it ever came down to that point, in my personal opinion, I don't know if I would want to be here in the aftermath of that. I mean, if that's God's choice for me that I have to be here after that, of course, then I would learn to adapt. But what I personally think about that, would I want to be here in the some kind of Mad Max apocalyptic scenario or something like that? I don't know. Hopefully, I don't believe, and this is my optimistic side talking, and hopefully this is reassuring to some of the viewers or some of the listeners, is that I don't believe we'll ever get to that point. I don't think the nuclear weapons are going to be used in a volley. Maybe one or two might be used here and there, being realistic, but I don't think that ever that option will be used where everybody launches their entire arsenals at each other. I could see maybe one being technically used here, whatever, destroying a base or maybe unfortunately a city or something like that. But I don't see, honestly, an entire volley of nuclear weapons being used. And at the same time, I also don't believe that the New World Order is going to be successful. So I know that part of the New World Order's plan is hoping that probably a nuclear volley happens and then the world's population is brought down from 7 to 8 billion to 500 million in the matter of just minutes. But no, I don't think that the New World Order will be successful. And I see the tide already turning. And I see this election in France as the people waking up. A lot of those people that voted for Le Pen are conscious of what the Zionists and what the elites want to do to us, and this is the people's voices being heard. Le Pen, I don't know who she actually is in reality. She may or may not be the person that she says she is on the campaign, but if she actually is the person that she is on the campaign, and actually does these things, then she'll be a major thorn in the side of the elite and the New World Order plan for the world. And I think that also the European Union, the dominoes might start falling for the European Union. The violent collapse, like people have said that they would for the last 10 years. There's been talk about the European Union collapsing for a long time. But this might actually bring about the end for them. And also, I see the tide turning also in the Middle East and whatnot. I see, how it's been. I see how the on the Middle East, you have the Yemeni government or whatever that's been able to. They actually became another, one that they have to take off the list. There was 4. It was just Syria and Iran, and now Yemen's another one that the elites have to take off the list in order to take total control of the Middle East. And now they seem to have lost their grip on Iraq, so maybe Iraq has been added onto the list. So now it's went from, maybe they did take out Gaddafi or whatever, but now 2 more popped up that they have to deal with, and now potentially Lebanon might go. So now you have 5 countries in the Middle East they have to deal with compared to just 2 that they had to dealt with before. And that's why I believe a lot that when they do strike Syria in the end, they're probably going to turn that regional. It'll be Syria, Iran, all these other countries will probably get involved. And we could expect to see warfare in the entire Middle Eastern regions, not just Syria and Iran alone. Potentially warfare even going into North Africa and surrounding areas. I definitely expect there could be war. In my opinion, it would be probably at the minimum from Saudi Arabia to Iran. That entire region probably, with battles, combat going on. But worst case scenario, seeing stuff going from Morocco all the way to Pakistan or something, in the worst case scenario, which is a spillover if that war was to happen. It's already spilling over. Syria and Iraq have spilled over into each other. It's already this World War III seems to have already started in small increments. Is that it's not going to blow up overnight, similar to some of the similar to like World War I or whatever that happened. Was like World War I built up with skirmishes. It just kind of happened. With the invasion of Austria-Hungary into Serbia. It was World War II. There was preludes to it, similar to like I think both World War I and World War II had that. World War III had preludes for sure. Ukraine was kind of a prelude. This whole civil war, of course, has been a prelude to World War III instead of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan. There's been multiple. There's been some foreshadowing for sure into the future of the big war to happen. I mean, I could say that the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was kind of a foreshadowing into the future of a massive urban warfare operation taking place in the Middle East, major fighting, the scenes that we saw. And, in 1991 also when we saw the SAM missiles being used and a major Middle Eastern military actually using a lot of its arsenal was seen. The fourth biggest military actually on the planet at the time. The Iraqi military was gigantic, similar to the Iranian military, which might be almost up there as high up there on the list, but I don't think it is. I think that there's probably the United States and then probably Russia. Actually, when it comes to active soldiers, I believe North Korea has the most, but I don't think that's really what we go by. It's more like probably like U.S., Russia, China, India. And then probably somewhere along, probably Iran's probably about like sixth place. There's also German military; they're pretty big. At the Syrian military is actually, I don't think it's too big, but at the same time, they seem to have a lot of spirit for sure. They keep fighting. They've lost a lot of soldiers. I think they've lost like 100,000 in this war, which is like double what we lost in Vietnam. When you start comparing that, they lost, what Caleb Maupin in the article about Syria, he said that they lost over 500,000. He said, and there's low estimates showed over 300,000 people died in Syria. The neocons' agenda in Syria has killed a lot of people, and people don't really want to take this seriously. But it's something that needs to be taken seriously. What's happened in Syria? It's disastrous. It's horrible what's went on in Syria at this point. And people don't realize it's going to keep going on, and people need to be informed what the United States is getting into. Maybe with a last-minute push or whatever, we can awaken enough people in order to at least people will know what's going on, rather than at the moment what's going on, they come running to us for answers. It's like I say that I hope I want to be the person that's sitting here, and when it actually goes down, you're running to me for answers, and then I tell you I told you so. I'm not going to be that person. I don't want that to happen. I don't see this, this whole information war as anything of self-righteousness or whatever. I see this information war as something of informing the public of what's going on, and also hoping to make a change. Now, I realize that some things probably can't be changed. That's, being totally honest, being 100% real, can really this war in Syria, the United States march to Syria actually be changed? Probably not. Can the United States march to Syria actually be changed? Probably not. But could could potentially future things, talk about like the potential, about the whole New World Order, the big picture, could that be changed? I believe it can. I believe the New World Order does not have to happen. And, to the people, and, me, I'm definitely religious, and I definitely believe divine powers are what ultimately is going to save us in the end. But I don't like the idea of, some of the truthers, I think, that have the idea that we should just sit down and relax and let, God do everything, because I don't think that's how God exactly works. God's in us. So it's up to us. We have free will. I don't think that God would be very happy with us. I don't think Jesus will be very happy with us if he came back and saw that we did nothing and we let all this atrocities went down, because I mean, it's pretty clear that we have free will. Only a few Christians, I think, actually believe otherwise. And since we have free will, we must do good with that and try to do something with that. And, people, a lot of times, and also we apply that to other things, but it's like they won't want to apply that to make politics and stuff like that, because I think they believe these are too daunting of tasks. And they're too daunting for one person. They're too daunting for 100 people. But for all of us united, it's not a daunting task. And, remember that the American Revolution was done with 3 people. Or, I mean, not 3 people, 3%. Remember that the Cuban Revolution was done with, it started off, and I actually got the actual numbers, I think it was 82 men, and then only 12 of those men actually survived the first battle. When the first battle actually took place, the Cuban Revolution. There's been moments where a few men have been able to do great things. And distinctive with our numbers, the numbers that we have in this country, I mean, I know that the amount of people that are dissatisfied with Congress is like 90%. The amount of people that are dissatisfied with the government is way up there. And the amount of people that know about the New World Order and the 9/11 truthers, I mean, there's some estimates that 15% of the people lived 9/11 was a lie. Imagine if we united, 15% of the people united. That is about 50 million people. If 50 million people were to unite and go to the streets of Washington, D.C. and demand the resignation of our government, and if a lot of us were, we don't even have to, all be armed or whatever for that to be successful. I don't even think that with that numbers, I mean, I have to be realistic, though, is that some people say that it could all be peaceful or whatever, and there's no need for any kind of violent or even threats of violence. That's being unrealistic, because you have to realize who our enemy is, and they'll slaughter us if we're, being totally peaceful and whatnot. Though I wonder, with 50 million of us, would they be able to do anything against that? But we definitely have the numbers to be able to do something. It's up to us whether we want to do something and whether we can unite and stop fighting over little, splitting hairs all the time of what little differences that we have between each other. And even if it is major differences between a patriot and a Black Lives Matter protester or whatever, is that we is to unite against the government, unite who we believe to be the same oppressor. We believe that there's the same oppressor at play, but and also it's like the same thing to people that talk about unity between and for Muslims and Christians to stop hating each other, is similar. They find the similarities, and is that the Muslim and Christian population in this country is both being ultimately they're one's being shown as an enemy by the Zionist lobby, and another's being used by the Zionist lobby. But finding the similarities and finding a common, it's different. Talk about one was about finding a common enemy, another one's about finding a common belief, which Muslim Christians both believe in the same God, but yet being told to hate each other. But finding unity is the important thing. That's what's important. Unity is the key to any successful changes in this country in the future. Otherwise, if we continue to fight over small problems, and we continue to have more factionalization, we will never see the things that we talk about. We'll never be able to have a successful revolution in this country, and we'll just end up being labor units of those people as an elite, because we weren't able to unify. We weren't able to unify against the New World Order.
The point of no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return, and if I back down